85% of people are just checked out and couldn't care less, right, about what they're doing, right? How do you actually motivate people? And most people think that if you pay people more money, they will be more motivated to work.
Not true.
That is not true. So the first thing that someone needs to do to become intrinsically motivated to come to work is they need to have a really clear and defined sense of purpose. Quest. Even though people may not consciously say that, subconsciously that's exactly what they're feeling, right? There's a real disconnect between what I'm doing and does it matter.
Welcome back to another episode of Vancouver Real. My name is Andy Zaremba, and with me behind the helm today is my brother Mike.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Nice to be back in your earbuds.
And as usual, we're recording out of 70 West Cordova Street here at Float House in Gastown, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And if you haven't heard of floating yet, you've probably been living under a rock for a while because we have really permeated the city, which we've proven at the Wellness Show. We did the Wellness Show back in 2013, and when we were talking to people about floating for the first time, it was maybe 1 out of 20 might have heard of it.
Oh, right? If that.
1 out of 20, if that. And now it's like almost everybody has heard of it. So we're definitely getting the word out there, and it's definitely reaching more people. But now it's like, okay, how do we get to that point of getting people from hearing about it to actually getting into the centers?
Yeah.
And if you want to get floating a stride, you've been a little, unsure or cautious or whatever around it, use the promo code Vancouver Real, and that will get you a 20% discount on a single float. And also visit our website, floathouse.ca, because that has all sorts of great resources and what you can expect the day of. And we also have a great video online called What is Floating? You can find that on YouTube or on our website as well. And it'll tell you what to expect from your flotation experience. So floathouse.ca is the website, and the promo code is Vancouver Real for a 20% discount.
Yeah, and we will also give a shout out to Omega Point YouTube channel. Omid helps us behind the scenes with the post-production of Vancouver Real, and he also has this excellent YouTube channel and Facebook page where he puts out a lot of custom creations that he does video production wise. I know he hasn't put anything out for a while because he's been working on the Shots of Awe quite regularly with Jason Silva and other projects. So I think his channel's been a little bit more dormant, but they're still really cool. And I think he does have something he's on the works of for it. But anyways, check out Omega Point if you haven't yet, and give him a like on Facebook as well.
Awesome. And also, if you would like to come and meet us in person, we are doing monthly meetups now. In fact, we have one scheduled for the month of April. It's a gentleman named Juno, and he's going to walk us through on how to build your own website and all the ins and outs and everything that you need to know about building a website, how to actually do it, and probably little tips and tricks on how to actually get your website found, to optimize it. So the meetup is actually posted on the Vancouver Real Facebook page, or you can get connected with the community on the Vancouver Real Meetups group page, and then you can stay up to date with all of the meetups that we have going on.
Awesome. Cool.
So big shout out to the people that are helping us organize that: Candace White, Lisa, Sean, Nicola, and Carlos now. So we have a full team behind us making these things happen.
Yeah, they're awesome. Amazing people, and without them, we wouldn't be able to do as many things as we're trying to do with the whole Vancouver Real community and network and everything like that. So mega props to them, and a huge heartfelt thank you from Andy and I.
Absolutely. And again, also, if you like what you hear today, if you can go to our iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher and leave us a review and a rating, that's really helpful, because last I heard, there's about 1 million podcasts out there these days. So the more reviews and ratings and shares and likes and subscribes and comments and all that you can do definitely help us get found. So we really appreciate that if you're willing to help us out and support the podcast.
All right. That's it.
And today, with us, an Alexander Boldazar recommendation, the anarchist lawyer, as he's been dubbed on this show. Casey Miller, welcome to Vancouver Real.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here. So you have a company called 6.5 Consulting, or 6.5consulting.com.
Yep.
And Before we get into exactly what you do for work, why don't we tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this line of work, and then we'll talk about what 6.5 Consulting really is.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, what I do at 6.5 Consulting is help organizations become their best selves. We're a leadership consultancy, and I can talk to you guys a lot about what we do, but the story on how I got to where I am is that, like a lot of people, I've had some crappy bosses in my life, right? And I've worked for some otherwise...
We've all had that.
Right. I've worked for some otherwise potentially great companies, but it was ultimately thwarted because their cultures were not all that inspiring. And so having had a couple of those experiences and at least my own educational background coupled with that and some pretty transformative life experiences, I said, you know what? I got to go and teach the world these things.
So what were some of those past jobs, and what fields were you working in at the time where you had these poor cultural work experiences and shitty bosses?
We can say that online.
You can swear. This is the internet. There's no regulatory bodies.
Rules, regulations here.
Okay. Listen, I have 2 master's degrees from Harvard, and I graduated in 2006, and from there, I worked in Mexico City.
What were your degrees in?
I have one in administration, the other one in theology. Yeah.
Whoa, okay.
Unlike our friend Baltazar, right?
Oh,
he was over at the law department. Yeah. I went to Mexico City afterwards, immediately after graduate school, and I worked for probably one of the top 3 families in terms of just economic output and wealth in Mexico.
Wow.
There are 20 families that kind of run Mexico, and I worked for number 3.
Damn.
And they ruled the world, it seemed, right? And they treated everyone so terribly. Mm-hmm. And without going into too much detail about that, and I was lucky because I was a gringo, right, living in Mexico. I was a white guy living in Mexico, so I was afforded a lot of certain privileges by no fault of my own, and by no deserving of my own, right? But it was the rest of her employees that were not afforded those privileges. They were born Mexican and just treated terribly. And so that was kind of my first kind of thought into, I wonder if we actually designed organizations to collectively appreciate employees better, what impact might we have, right?
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of research out there that this isn't me, right? That actually, if you do that, the impact of the organization is a lot greater.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like you can tell a lot about how well a business is run by how happy the employees are.
Sure.
What is it you think that determines? What are the main factors which determine the level of productivity, level of happiness, the lifetime of an employee at any given company? Now, that's a lot in a few words there.
Sure.
But what are some of the things that contribute to creating that great work environment?
Yeah, so it falls under the realm of engagement, right? Employee engagement is kind of the word that people use. Or motivation, right? How do you actually motivate people? And most people think that if you pay people more money, they will be more motivated to work.
Not true.
That is not true. That is 100% not true. It's true up until a point when people they need to feel that they're getting fair market value for what they're worth, right? And usually that's anywhere above up in Vancouver at about $55,000 and beyond. You actually can't incentivize people with an extra dollar.
Wow.
So what do? How do you motivate people? Turns out there are a couple of things you can do, right? And these are the things that I work on with organizations, right? So the first thing that someone needs to do to become intrinsically motivated to come to work is they need to have a really clear and defined sense of purpose. What is their organization about? And how are their contributions and activities lending towards that greater goal, right? It's the first piece.
Right.
The second piece in intrinsically motivating someone is determining whether or not they actually have some sense of autonomy in their work function, right? Can you make decisions about your job? Are you empowered to make decisions without getting lots of levels of approval, right? And then the last piece is whether or not you feel related. And there's a lot in there that we can talk about, but how well connected are you relationally to the other people in your office?
Right.
So you put those 3 things into a pot, and people actually like coming to work.
Right. So the first step would be, if you went into an organization, you need to figure out what the purpose of that organization is, and are those employees buying into that when they come into work?
100%. I would say 98% of most organizations out there can't actually tell you why they do what they do. They can tell you what they do. They maybe can tell you how they do it, right? The Simon Sinek why, you guys are familiar with that, right? But people really can't tell you why they're in the business of what they're doing. And that's fundamental, because without it, people don't feel like they're connected to something greater than themselves.
Right. So if you're going into a business that really isn't connected to that why, where do you start?
You do a lot of sitting down with people. You do a lot of sitting down with the executives and a lot of sitting down with everyone else in the organization to really hash out. And we have exercises and modules that really get to the core of why are we doing what we do, right?
Right.
And that's it.
I was going to ask, like, in general, do you feel like there's so much not knowing? Like, would you say the majority of companies, and you said the majority don't know their why? Is that what you kind of said there?
Sure.
What sort of consequence do you think that has on the world, our society, and stuff like that, by people not having a why associated with what they're actually doing, that deeper seated why, that purpose why?
Humans actually crave this. This is a part of our innate makeup, right? We constantly are searching for these why questions. We've been doing it since the dawn of time, right?
Yeah.
And then we go into a job where we spend a third of our lives, right? Or at least a third of our time. And if those questions aren't a part of our kind of existential quest, even though people may not consciously say that, subconsciously that's exactly what they're feeling, right? There's a real disconnect between what I'm doing and does it matter, right?
Huge.
People need to know that, right?
Yeah.
I heard a stat somewhere on a podcast, and they were saying that only about 30% of people actually find their work fulfilling.
It's about right.
Yeah.
It's about right. And it's less, and that's actually pretty, I'll get my stats backwards. In North America, it's about 60% of people that are just disconnected from their jobs.
Wow.
And they're just there, just kind of punching the clock, getting by, earning their paycheck, going home for the weekend.
And that's actually pretty good compared to the world. The world, it's about 85% of people are just checked out and couldn't care less, right, about what they're doing. And I think that's awful, man. From a personal point of view, right?
Well, it's bad for everybody. It's bad for the individual. It's bad for the business. It's bad for the customers. I mean, how much of a waste of time and energy is that for everyone to have people like that? And
there's stats around this, right? So for every $10,000 roughly that an employee is paid in North America, if they're not connected to their work, it's equivalent to about $3,400 of wasted money. So if you're making $50,000 an employee, it's roughly 20 grand of your paycheck, if you're not committed to your job, is just thrown out the window by your employer. And that's just one employee. If you've got 10 employees, right? How many employees do you guys have?
you're at 15.
15, right? We could do the math either here or offline, but right, we could do a quick assessment, right? And figure out if people aren't really committed to their purpose, it ends up being a very, very costly mistake for organizations.
Now, what is it about people being connected to their purpose that are going to make them more productive?
Because then they actually have something about themselves that they're lending to a greater cause. It's actually a fundamental part of who we want to be. As people, we want to know that who we are and what our skills are being lent to something bigger than ourselves.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And beyond that, we want, at least in jobs, we perpetually want and need experiences that make us better at what we do.
Right. So we have quite a few entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs and some business owners that listen to this show for sure. Now, let's say they're managing a group of people and their staff isn't particularly inspired. How would you go about putting that person or that organization into a process to find out what the purpose of that organization is?
Well, the first thing what we do is we do a diagnosis of where they are across our 6.5 buckets, right? So in my consultancy is called 6.5, and we work in 6.5 areas of engagement, right? So the first thing is we do an assessment to see where people are disconnected. And almost all the time they're going to be disconnected in the purpose bucket, right? And usually they're disconnected in the other 2 to 5 or 2 to 6, right?
Yes.
So to answer your question, what do we do then? Well, again, it's sitting down with everyone. There are modules that we have and processes that we have that get people to really start to think about questions that they may not know how to answer. Right?
What are the 6 buckets?
So the first one is purpose. right? First thing, that's absolutely what everyone needs to have. And then know that their skills are being lent to that. The second one is they need to work in environments where they feel trusted, right? So we do a lot of work on developing trust in an organization. The third piece is communication. How well or how poorly is information shared within an organization? And more importantly, do employees feel that they have enough information to do their jobs correctly, right? The fourth piece is emotional intelligence. We do a lot of work on identifying why am I the way that I am and why are you the way that you are, and how do those two things work together, right? And then multiply that by 100 employees, right? For example. The next one, and it's a fundamental piece, is creating healthy conflict. I'm an American, so maybe I can say this with a little bit of assertion. Canadians don't do very well with conflict.
No, we avert.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with it, right? And what happens when you don't deal with conflict? Well,
it just doesn't get resolved.
It doesn't get resolved, but beyond that, from an organizational point of view, innovation doesn't happen, right?
Yes.
Can't create new things because people don't feel that they can talk to other people, right? So there's a whole lot of work that we do on that. And then the last one is actually then the systems that reinforce this, right? Culture is, ultimately, that's what we're doing, is culture work. Culture is just behavior, the way that people behave, right? And one of the ways that you shift culture is by changing your behavior. So we work on creating systems that reinforce then these 5 different pieces.
Interesting.
Right. Let's go with that first piece on purpose.
Yeah.
So you just said that most businesses do not have a sense of purpose. If you're working with a business that does not have that sense of purpose, how do you go and create that for them or help them find their purpose? Like what can you do to get somebody, feeling meaningful in their job?
Well, let me ask you guys this question. Why are you guys doing Float House? What about Float House inspires you? Why are you running this?
We believe it's good for people.
Okay. Yeah. So what's your motivation behind that, though? You could be doing lots of other things, right?
That we want to do work in a meaningful way that's going to impact people for the better and earn a living that way, and one that's like not very impactful on the environment and treats people fairly and very ethical. So lots of factors, actually.
And I think in terms of specific to floating, if that's what part of your question is about, is basically when you go into a float tank, it's just you. And so every experience you have in there is an expression of yourself. And so we definitely believe that people can have that healthy dose of introspection. That's probably something that can benefit anybody. Okay. And so the float tank is an amazing environment to do that. So we believe in what this environment can do for people from an introspective standpoint, a conscious awareness standpoint. Again, these are all just words for going within and getting more acquainted with oneself. So we believe very firmly that that is a very important part of human development and evolution.
Sure. And
learning more about themselves and why they do the way they do and how much they can actually affect that. Because everything, again, that you experience in the float tank is internally derived. So if you're freaking out when actually everything is okay, well, you can see that very clearly and be like, okay, well, can I maybe not do that? How can I affect my experience from my internal perspective to not be in this circumstance of anxiety or whatever?
So how did you get, that's a very articulate answer, right? But what about your own life experiences that led you to make it resonate so much with you, right? Mm-hmm. Pardon me.
That's all good.
Wanting people to be aware.
Right. Well, I definitely, I could go and say that, I am projecting from my experiences of having that sort of experience myself. So in terms of becoming more aware of how I behave and my internal processes, especially of the mind, if you will, the ego, and how much that can impact me overall, positively and negatively, and being able to become more aware of that, more sensitive to it, and to grow and evolve as a person of myself, to better my life.
So everything he just said, and the good thing about that is that our team generally buy into that as well.
Sure.
So, we're paying, it's a service sector job, right? So we're paying industry standard wages. Yeah. They do get a commission as well.
Okay.
But, they could be working at countless other jobs, for the same amount of money.
Yeah.
So why are they here? And this is something that we touch base with them
Every meeting.
All the time in our staff meetings.
Awesome.
Like, why are you really here?
Yeah.
Because you could be working at a coffee shop. You could be working anywhere.
Right.
Really. So.
And what do they tell you?
They believe in what we're doing.
Right?
Yeah.
This is it, man. Right? So to answer your question, how do we go and work on a why with people? You guys are very articulate about that, right? And it seems like you guys have done a lot of personal work before coming here. It's probably not a coincidence that you're doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Right? It was
exactly.
quite deliberate what you guys chose to do.
Yeah.
Right?
And I was just going to say it, and it's been one we were just talking about before. It's been kind of surprising, like the different barriers that we have within this business. We didn't expect them to be what they were, and some of those are being like, people. I just assumed everyone would want to grow and evolve as a way, and not that they don't. I don't want to make that generalization, but I'm like, oh, this is such an amazing tool to help that, and it's very effective. So I thought, of course, people would be all into that. But it's amazing how there is a portion of the population that is apprehensive. Even when you kind of break it down and explain it, they're still a little bit nervous. So we did not expect that, but that's just us being more adventurous kind of ourselves and assuming that everyone is relatively adventurous, and that's just not the case.
You have a very elite education.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So maybe you're on that path intrinsically as well.
Yeah.
Or else you wouldn't have gone to that school. Right?
Truth be told, I don't know if Harvard taught me these things. I paid a lot of money to go to Harvard, and I don't know if they taught me these things. I think I had my own life experiences that I brought to it.
I guess I'm saying in a sense that you must be fairly motivated to be able to work hard enough to be able to go to school like that.
Yeah, and truth be told, I was born in fortunate privileges, right?
Right.
I was born an upper middle class white kid. That afforded me a lot of advantages.
Right. Gotcha.
I also did work pretty hard.
Yeah.
Right.
I imagine.
Yeah. But to go back to at least you guys here,
Yeah, sure.
you guys are attracting people that are kind of a similar mindset, that they want to be self-aware. They want, and their job allows them to do that through the floating.
And
right?
I would say that it definitely reflects in our employees and in our reviews. So we get these reviews every day called Listen 360 reports, where anyone who comes to the doors will get emailed like, okay, give us a rating from 0 to 10.
Right.
Basically 10 being the highest, and our scores are typically 9 or 10s.
What happens if you get a 2?
We contact them.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so basically, but normally,
Yeah.
they're praising us like crazy. We're getting those 9s and 10s, and almost like every third comment, they're mentioning how great our staff is. So, I mean, I feel like we've got it quite dialed here.
Sounds like it.
Because, I mean, we give it quite a lot of attention in terms of that. Like, our staff are, again, of course, they need management. But for the most part, they're here and they do care about what they're doing. So we got that purpose piece down. Now, what was the second part of that whole?
The second piece is once you kind of have that clear,
Yeah.
right? It's then how do you develop trust?
The trust.
The trust.
Okay, so trust meaning that you don't have like cameras looming over your desk while you're working, or they're monitoring maybe every keystroke that you make on your computer, or is that what you're talking about when it comes to trust?
Potentially. I mean, ultimately, I think what it boils down to is, do people feel valued at work, right? For who they are, right? Do they feel that they can ask questions? Do they feel that they can take certain risks without fear of repercussion or losing their job? Do they feel that if they're a person of color, that their opinions matter? If they feel that they're a woman, can they speak up, right? If they're naturally shy or an introvert, are they given the right space or the appropriate space to also just be themselves, right? One of the fundamental things we work on is, are you the same person at work that you are at home? You should be able to be that person.
Yeah.
100%. And if you're not, then there's a disconnect there, right? Yeah.
And if you're using our business as a bit of a case study right now, perhaps, I would say that we do encourage them to definitely be themselves. And one thing we say to them routinely is like, make your shift your own.
Yeah.
So like, put on the type of music you want to hear, make the lighting the way you want to make it. Get into your own routine and your own flow. So we don't micromanage every aspect of what they're doing when they're here.
Yeah.
There's certain things that are not negotiable, obviously.
Totally.
But they have certain levels of, I can make this my own, my own shift. So it's like and there are people that'll be like, I like to float when X employee is on because I like the way they do it.
Yep. So here's an example. I'm working with a engineering firm, and they came up with this radical idea, at least for engineering firms, that they weren't going to give their employees any vacation days. There wasn't a set number of days. Employees could take as many or as little as they wanted, right? The tech industry does this.
Cool.
Usually the tech industry does it, though, more for liability reasons. They didn't want people to bank up lots of days and then go to a new job and then cash out on them. Right. So there wasn't that piece. I'd like to think that it was more, empathetically motivated.
Yes.
But from this engineering firm, it was. It was from the fundamental premise that you're an adult everywhere outside of your life. Right? Mm-hmm. You have to make decisions as a big kid every day, what time you're going to get up, drop your kids off at school, what you're going to make for lunch, all the stuff that you do. Why wouldn't you be allowed to be an adult at work as well and make adult decisions and be responsible as an adult as well?
So don't treat them like children.
Treat them like adults. Yeah. And so if you feel like you can get your job done and also take a month-long vacation, so long as you're getting your job done, then that's fine because you're an adult and we're going to treat you that way. The same holds true. Would be different in your particular organization because they have shifts and there are parameters, right? But it's fundamentally imperative for employees to be able to exercise a degree of self-determinism in how they execute their job.
Right, and we've all worked in jobs at some point in time when we've been micromanaged, and nobody likes that.
No,
right?
No one does.
No one likes being micromanaged.
Well, because it takes away your sense, again, of being valued.
And you really got to think if someone is micromanaging their staff or they are being micromanaged, that says that we have no confidence in your ability whatsoever, and we're going to tell you every step you have to do to make this job work, or else you're not doing your job properly.
And that's one of the first ways that employees then start to check out, right?
Yeah.
If you don't trust me enough to do my job, then I don't trust you to be here, right?
Yes.
Totally,
yeah.
Right? So the trust piece is really a management piece that we work on, right? Mm. It's really sitting down with managers and kind of understanding their style of management and working with them on a one-on-one basis on how do they play chess. It's not a checkers game at work. It's a chess game.
So now we have the third bucket.
Yeah, which is communication. How is information shared, right? So how do you guys share information here at work?
We actually use a Facebook group page quite frequently. And basically we'll communicate things that need to get done on that group page, which is, closed group. And the staff that are on had the Facebook group page on, and they're seeing these things.
How would you know if an employee wasn't telling you something?
How would we know if the employee
if there was a problem at work? How would you know if the employee was telling you that, or if he or she wasn't? What are your systems in place for that?
I don't think we have systems in place for that, but I think that we do have quite a bit of trust that we allow them to voice whatever they want. We always give them a chance to voice their concerns, and they do.
I see you guys hugging each other out there. So
we hug quite a bit. We're huggers, man. We're going to be hugging after this podcast, believe it or not. You might not think so now, but you're going to be hugging. So I mean, I think that they do feel like it's safe that they can express their opinions and they're not going to get smacked down for it.
Right. Yeah. One of the pieces that we work in the communications department is, do employees have enough information to do their jobs? And in large organizations, this becomes a big problem, right? Because they have no
tools.
Well, marketing's up to some scheme over here. I'm in sales. I have no idea. They haven't talked to me. I feel like I'm hung out to dry. Right. And probably vice versa. Right? Yeah. So in large organizations, this becomes imperative, right? Yes. Do I have the information to do the job that I was hired for?
Yeah. Right. One of our strategies, too, is when we have shifts, to have a half-hour overlap between the two shifts.
Okay.
It's a very simple level, but at least they're hanging out for half an hour to, one, obviously logistically catch up on what's going on in the center that day or whatever. But I would assume it gives them a chance to talk amongst themselves, maybe other issues, whether it's talking about us or the general manager or something. At least it gives them that opportunity to discuss work.
And we have pretty frequent.
So we give them that time as well. There's that time right there is one factor, I guess.
Yeah. So before we launch any kind of campaign or a new sale or whatever, we generally have a meeting and we prepare them for it and we talk about it and we get their concerns about it and we kind of open that whole thing up before we launch anything. So in terms of our marketing department, which would be us,
right?
Not doing something that the sales team is aware of, which would be them. We have a big meeting. We get them prepped. We say, this is what it's going to be. This is what it's going to be about. This is how you guys can execute it. This is how you can make it successful.
So one thing, maybe just a small recommendation, is rather than pulling everyone into a room and tell them what you're going to do and how they're going to fit into that, is have them have some buy-in along the way. You guys ultimately are the decision makers, right? But have them be a part of that process before it's announced. Gets people more connected because they feel that it's part of theirs.
If they have a vested interest and there's like a co-creation going on, they believe it's partially their idea.
Or they just feel like, you know what, they trust me enough that they're going to keep me in the loop.
Right.
I'm not a decision maker on this, but my bosses actually believe enough in me as a person that they're going to tell me what's going on in departments that I'm not a part of.
Gotcha.
And that transparency is fundamental.
So do you think a good example of that would be to like say, hey, you know what, next month, this is what we're kind of thinking about doing, this kind of campaign. What are your thoughts on that? Just to get...
Totally. Okay. Right? It gets people more just invested in the process.
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So fourth bucket.
EQ.
So emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence.
It's a big one.
It's a huge one, right?
Now, right off the bat, so how does having high emotional intelligence make like working relationships easier?
I wrote a blog about this the other day. I hope I can remember. I hope I can remember all the points. Ultimately, listen, the more you know about why you respond to a situation, ultimately puts you in a better place to respond, right? Because if you know how you're feeling, more importantly, if you have a well-established vocabulary that describes how you're feeling, you then can fine-tune every situation, right? If you just say, for example, I'm feeling bad, well, what does that mean? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling hangry? Are you feeling disappointed? Are you feeling deceived? There's a lot of different, right? So the more attuned you are with how you're feeling, preps you to respond to situations different and betterly. Betterly, that's not a word.
It's a word now. We made it.
We'll write Harvard. We'll be like, you might want to revoke his master's. He just used a made-up word.
Bigly.
Awesome.
I make up words all the time, though.
Now, when you talk about emotional intelligence, that's being self-aware of what you're feeling and being able to articulate that. Now, does that also include being able to tell how another person's emotional state of being or where they're at?
Yeah, the better you get at it, right? This is a process too, right? We should all be perennially getting better at knowing ourselves and hopefully being able to read other people, right? But this is an art that takes a lot of time and a lot of practice.
Is this something that you work with organizations and you do training with their teams on how to have a higher EQ?
Yeah, so we start with something called the DISC model. Are you guys familiar with what that is?
No.
It's a behavioral response to EQ, and it works very well in organizations because you may not be able to talk to someone about how they're feeling, but you can see how they're responding, right?
Yes.
Right? You can see their response to something. So it's a behavioral approach to EQ. And it runs on a gamut from very high extroverts at the top to very, very deep introverts on the bottom. On the left-hand side would be tactical-oriented people. And on the right-hand side would be people, right?
Right.
And because it's a circle, people can fit in any kind of piece of that, and depending on how far or close you are to the center is your intensity on that. So I am a very people person and a very large extrovert, right? Is kind of where I am. If I'm in a situation with someone that is an introvert that's much more tactical and detail-oriented in their response, I'm going to have to tailor my responses to that, right? And I should know that. I should know that as a boss, how each person is different. I should know that as an employee. How do each of my colleagues respond to different situations? It's almost like having a sign on your head that says, treat me this way. Engage with me in these parameters. And so after we go through that assessment, then there's lots of tools that you can use to learn how each different person likes to be addressed and how they like to solve different problems.
So would this be your generic team building kind of work that you would you would go into an organization and do? Like, so you'd learn more about your other coworkers and how they operate?
Yeah, that's a piece of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, how do you get your team members or get the employees to learn about each other's ways of carrying themselves?
Well, so we do an assessment, and then we actually chart it on a big graph for everyone to see, right? All 50 employees. And that's actually then becomes what their organizational culture really is, right? Because if you've got most everyone up on the far upper right quadrant, and 3 or 4 down here on the bottom. Well, it's primarily this one, but that you need to respect these 3 that are down here, right?
And that way everyone sees who they are.
Who they are, and they know how to do it.
Wow.
Truth be told, it's usually all over the map. There's usually no one predominant personality. And so it becomes everyone's responsibility to be accountable to each other, right? That's one of the fundamental pieces of being a team, right?
Awesome.
Is the accountability piece.
Right.
Yeah.
Good shit,
Okay.
man. This is really good.
So we got the 5th bucket now.
Yeah, that's healthy conflict.
Healthy conflict.
How do
All
you-
right. Now,
Us Canadians,
we don't like that word. The
I know.
C word,
they
conflict.
can't even
No.
say it.
We can't. No conflict. No.
Yeah.
We're not talking about that on the show.
Totally, man. Right? This is a big piece too, right?
Yeah.
And there's lots of tools that you use, and ultimately, I think at the core of it is there's a vulnerability piece that once you get people comfortable enough, and they become vulnerable and inquisitive and ultimately empathetic towards other people. I think healthy conflict really rests on those 3 pieces, probably primarily the empathy part. Really understanding and caring why another person is coming to that conclusion.
Can you give us an example of healthy conflict?
There's a great organization that's actually doing this very well right now. Kent Employment Law. You guys heard of them? They're
No.
up on Broadway and 9th. They do healthy conflict very well. It's one of the fewer organizations in town that I think work hard at that. In terms of just, I bet you guys probably do healthy conflict pretty well. It seems like
Between
you
us,
yeah.
as brothers, most likely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I would say
You guys
so.
try to understand what the other person's saying, right? Internalize that, offer your perspective. And most times when you do that well, but I'm sure your own experience speaks to that, a new answer comes out that you probably wouldn't have thought of on your own.
Yeah.
Right?
As Canadians too, absolutely, yes. Yes. So as Canadians, we are more adverse to conflict, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
What are some of the advantages to having conflict in an organization?
That's where creation happens. That's where artists can flourish, right? That's where innovation takes place, right? It's when there's a nice kind of butting of heads in a respectful, wonderful way. Amazing shit can happen. And here's proof of where healthy conflict isn't working. Look to the South, right? Look to what happened just with Brexit, right? Look what's about to happen in France with Le Pen, right? These are prime examples where 2 opposing sides are so fundamentally at odds, don't know how to engage with each other, certainly aren't being empathetic to the other side, doing no good jobs at listening, right? It's just fundamentally what my opinion is. And look what happens. There's just massive stagnation. On the microcosm, this can happen on our relationships, right? It can happen in our friendships. It can happen with our parents. And it certainly happens at work. People just aren't that overt about it at work.
And I know you're a philosophy major, so we can probably dive into those questions a little bit more in a little bit. But I want to get to that 6th bucket. So what's the 6th?
The 6th one is just how then, once we work out these 5, then what are actually the behaviors that we're gonna put in place that reinforce all of these? So we work with organizations to actually create a team charter where people actually set up what are the protocols and the systems and the procedures that you're going to do, and what happens when you don't do them. Right? It's the accountability piece.
So literally for like every role, every position, everything that happens in that company, something like that's created?
Well, it depends on the complexity of things, but certainly, yeah, there's a lot of procedural things that go into that. You want to actually redesign the culture, and the culture comes from the behavior pieces. So, and this isn't something that I do, right? It's something that the work is done collectively amongst the group. How do you guys want to reinforce what you just said to me that's important to you, right?
Right.
Yeah, and because then it's theirs, right? And I can't tell you how to do it. I'll give you the parameters, but then it ultimately has to be yours.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then what's the half bucket?
So the half is, so many years ago, I rode my bike across the United States on kind of a whim. And I wrote a book about how do you find meaning in your life. And the half, the book was called 6.5. The half is the same that it was there, that it is here. And I think in life, and this might resonate with you guys, it seems like you guys are kind of on a quest, right?
We're questing.
Oh, yeah.
I think, life mandates that we do 2 things at the same time. I think it mandates that we be fully participatory, and I think it mandates that we be fully observant, that we are on the dance floor of life and on the balcony at the same time. And in the workplace, as a manager, or as an executive working with these 6 pieces, you have to be constantly observing, how well are we EQing with one another? How well is our trust? How good is our communication? Are we living up to what our purpose is? Are our values being lived? But not so much so that it becomes just a mental exercise that you're not actually doing the work, or vice versa, that you don't get so entrenched in doing the work that you don't actually take the time to reflect. So the half is this careful balance of doing 2 things at once. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of that. I mean, I hear that and I kind of jump to a more of a metaphysical approach to it, because it is kind of paradoxical in a way, right? To be able to be doing 2 things that are kind of contradictory at the same time. And, when you were saying observing, that's, for me, it's like taking that step back and being objective of it, obviously, but also I thought you were going to say, or I was trying to tie in my side of it, would be like a surrendering.
Okay.
As to letting things be what they are and being, I guess, and being okay with what is. And then if need be, it's kind of the same thing. You're being aware of like, okay, what's actually happening right now? And then what sort of action step do I want to take because of what I'm aware of?
100%.
So
100%. Yeah. These are.
So what about
the juice of life?
What about your super epic bike trip across North America came to? I'm especially curious about that half bucket point. Like, was there an experience that happened there? Was it a kind of like a totality thing of like just reflection that kind of brought that about, or what happened in that process for you?
I was working in Mexico City.
They didn't have the wall built by then, so you rode your bike right across the border.
I moved back to the States, and I was dating this guy, and he dumped me. And then I lost my job. I couldn't work. It was 2008. There was nothing to be had, right? Didn't have a place to live. I was heartbroken. So I bought a bike, and I just started pedaling it. And I thought to myself, because I hadn't ridden a bike in like 20 years. I don't actually like bikes. I was like, no one's ever ridden their bike across the United States, I bet I could do this.
It sounds very Forrest Gump-esque. You just, one day, he starts running, and you just get on your bike and start riding.
It's very similar. It was 2 weeks after I bought the bike. Yeah, I just didn't just buy it and start riding. I trained for 2 weeks.
Oh, you trained for 2 weeks?
For 2 weeks.
Okay. Did you pack anything, or did you just go and let a beard grow out and kind of live off the land?
I had 2 panniers, or whatever they're called, on the back of your tires. One was for a camera and a computer because I was writing, and the other I had, I think, 6 T-shirts and a couple pair of socks. And I literally that was it. And I had a tent. But mostly people would see me and they would think I was cool or interesting, right? Part of this is you guys probably, again, relate to this. The more authentic you are in life, the more people respond to that. And I was on this quest. I was asking people how they found meaning in their life. And that resonated with people. I think, you brought this up earlier, like when people sometimes you don't ask the why. I don't think people do, but I think given the opportunity, they actually really want to explore it.
I think everybody does.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So I was outright asking these audacious questions, like, why are we here?
Yeah.
How do you find meaning in your life? Yeah. Right. And genuinely curious to what the truck driver would say, right? To what the lady serving me coffee, right? And people did. They told me their stories. And so I wrote a book about that, and I don't know if I'm answering your question about the half, but I became very aware that what I was doing was absurd. But I was also still doing it every day. Right. Right. So I think that's kind of where the half came from.
Cool.
In that process.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to ride across America?
I think it was 72 days or so.
Wow.
So where did you start and where did you end?
Started in Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
I floated or something.
Yeah. Float on. Shout out to Float on. Yes. Awesome.
Right?
Cool.
And then I ended up I went back to Harvard. So I rode my bike all the way to Harvard.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how do we find meaning in our life? What was the conclusion after this epic journey?
It's not too dissimilar from the stuff that I teach in organizations. We all need to become clear about why we're here, and then we need to lend our skills towards whatever that why is. We need to perennially get better and better at whatever it is that we do and share that with the world.
When you say why we're here, do you mean why you're in that organization? Or do you mean like why do human beings even exist?
Well, it would be nice if the two were the same. Oftentimes they're not, right? We don't all get the opportunity to align exactly who we are with our vocation, right?
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we can't align part of it, right? And derive some sense of meaning and gratification from that piece, from the work piece.
I think if people are really thinking that way, and let's say someone is a high performer, well, maybe they're not exactly 100% pumped about their job, but how do they show up to their job on a day-to-day basis? Is that a reflection? Can that be a reflection of how, of their personality by how well they perform at that job? Even though it's not the best job in the world, maybe.
Sure.
But they take pride in doing a good job because that's who they are as a person.
Sure, potentially. For me, that's more of a management question. Do you, in the case that you have a very high performer, but that maybe doesn't really align with what your core values are, what do you do? And oftentimes organizations, they keep the person because they're a performer, right? But that brings the rest of the team down. So it takes actually a pretty strong manager to say, listen, as high performing as you are, you're actually not aligning with what we believe, what we profess. And here's, I think, where it starts to make a lot of sense. We are in an age where people distrust almost every institution out there. Right?
Big time.
Big time. The media is hugely distrusted. Governments are hugely distrusted. NGOs, international work is distrusted, and so are businesses. Banks. Institutions are distrusted. And the voice of the employee is becoming more and more and more powerful. And the brand of an organization is becoming more and more reliant on what those people say about it. So it's, I think, in a way, kind of forcing organizations to actually be true to who they are or who they say they are.
Right. I mean, we live in the age of the internet where information flows much more freely.
Yep.
Everybody can, anybody could go home and make a post on social media that could be potentially really damaging.
That's right. So I don't know exactly what the question is, but
well, let's go down this rabbit hole. I like where we're going.
I like where we're going with this.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
So
this is mistrust for institutions. So was there an age, probably in North America, when we weren't so mistrustful? I mean, I feel like in Eastern Europe, it's just always been mistrust. Like they just always assume that the government's trying to screw them in some way, right? But in North America, I feel like there must have been a golden age, maybe in like the 50s, maybe the 60s, where people trusted in their government and and trusted in what was happening and in the system as a whole. What has gradually shifted from that golden age to today, which has generated all this mistrust?
I don't know if I can tell you what, but I can tell you when. Edelman, you guys remember them, a big PR company, big communications company, Edelman, all across Canada and North America. Every year they publish something called the Edelman Trust Barometer.
Cool. Interesting.
And it measures the public's trust in institutions, the four major ones that I just talked about. And they've been doing it for the past 20 years. And up until about 2 years ago, actually, trust was actually pretty good.
Up until 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Trust
so we were early adopters.
Yeah. I'll send you their presentation. It's phenomenal.
Cool. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now it's, there were some fluctuations annually, right? But it's really been in the past 2 years that just rampant distrust has happened in the world.
Interesting.
And the why I don't know, but the what is the rise of populism, right?
Populism.
Well, what is populism, right?
Yeah.
The protectionary, isolatory, me first mentality, right? That you're seeing as a result of Brexit and France and now with Donald Trump, right? So distrust is a major component right now in our society.
Yeah.
And from my vocational point of view, it oftentimes becomes a brand conversation with companies. How do you build your brand? Well, you don't do that through an ad campaign. You actually do it by building the trust within your employees. That becomes now your biggest advocate for what your company is.
It's a powerful one, for sure.
Well, yeah, it is.
Can you go into that a little bit? Like, why is that so powerful of a way to build a brand, like going through your employees?
Well, just think about it from a human perspective, right? Right? employees really are the inside voice of what an organization is.
Yes.
And more they're becoming the ones who are believed, right?
I'm guessing if the institution is distrusted more,
Right.
the people that, and everyone, most people are employees. Most people are employees, right?
For sure.
So most people are going to probably believe the story of the employees over the institution story. Is that part of it, do you think?
That has been the shift in the past couple of years. Before it was the CEO comes out, or the president comes out, or the prime minister comes out, and generally, there is some levels of distress, but there was a lot more authority given to people of authority, and that's not the case as much anymore.
The anti-authority movement.
Yeah. So the more and more employees believe in what they're doing, the literature is showing, the research is showing that it's actually positively impacts the company's bottom line.
Wow. Well, we're definitely on the right path with that then, with what we're doing. Like, we're really getting our team on board and letting them know that their work is valuable, and when they're here and they're engaging with people, it is valuable, and they never know how somebody's going to come into our facility, they're going to float, it could help them through something that they're going through in their life. And
How are you guys telling that story?
We're just telling it to them, to our team. Basically, we're saying you never know how you're going to impact somebody's day or life when they walk through the doors here.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Would that be a good message for us to share more with our social media marketing?
I think it'd be phenomenal if you guys didn't share it, but they shared their stories, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
Golden nuggets, platinum nuggets.
That's why you got to drag out podcasts, because these nuggets are coming out, right?
That's right.
I want to go back to the distrust thing. I think I started losing or getting a sense of distrust around 2008.
Okay.
With everything that happened there, with the financial crisis.
Okay.
That's when it shifted for me. So I was surprised when you said it was only 2 years ago.
Well, I think that there was, according to this report, right, and I'll send it to you, that was the biggest shift. There were some movements, right, but the biggest bifurcation in the trust line was 2 years ago.
And there must have been some event at that point.
You were making me be a political scientist, so I don't know, man.
Harvard, you know everything.
I was at the bottom of the barrel there, man. I barely got out.
Bottom of the barrel is the top of the heap everywhere else, right?
Well, 2 years ago was the beginning of the campaign.
I would, yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's yeah.
Right? 2 years ago.
Maybe just the fact that he ran was the turning point.
Yeah. And he ran on a message that appealed to a lot of people who felt disconnected and ignored, and they were finally given a voice. Right? So I think that was.
And then, in your opinion, with Trump, with him running, do you think he was aware of what he was doing the entire time? Was he aware that there was this group of disenfranchised people, and he essentially tapped into that, mobilized them, united them, and then, from that.
100%.
So he knew about that.
Totally.
Or whoever his team knew about that.
I think he totally knew about it, and he played into their fears. And people are motivated by fear.
Yeah. And I'm guessing it's not Trump. I'm guessing he has a pretty substantial team behind him, like orchestrating this whole thing.
Well, Kellyanne Conway certainly is fantastic, right?
Who's that?
Let's not go too far into politics. I can really ruin my rep on this one.
Okay. It's a good conversation.
It is.
Yeah.
I think he's brilliant in the sense that he learned how to manipulate and play on people's insecurities. And there was a vast majority of people, I wouldn't say majority, but a huge number of people in the United States that felt economically and socially marginalized. And he played upon those fears and ran a campaign based off of what I think probably are not truths, in the sense that blocking Muslims and building a wall is actually not going to bring back more jobs. But those were the fears that people had, and he capitalized on those.
Amazing.
What do you about, because like when I actually see, and I don't know how the whole political structure works, but then you see like the actual hard numbers of Trump supporters or Trump voters versus Hillary voters, and there's actually like 200,000, no, I think it's like 2 million less votes cast for Trump.
Yeah.
But and more for Hillary. So it's just like, again, those whole the whole structure of the whole thing. So, but ultimately it's like, wow. So even though she got the majority vote, this guy's in power, and just like it completely throws the whole like, because a lot of people don't understand how it all works, probably, and
so,
it's just like in terms of like distrust of the institutions, it's like, so what the fuck? I voted for that. More people voted for that, but we're not going to get that.
Right.
It's just so confusing, and it's like this doesn't even work. Then it's frustration.
Yes, the electoral college is a very challenging thing for some. It's also a protectionary thing, right? I think I'm not a constitutionalist or a scholar on it, but my understanding of it is that the reason it was invented was to protect certain smaller states with less population from being overridden by the majority. So states like California have they have a larger number of electoral votes, but disproportionately they don't actually represent their population. So a state like Montana actually has, it's like 3 electoral votes, even though their population isn't a 30th or 1/3, I guess, of the equivalent of what California's are. But it was a way to give more power to smaller states.
I see. Okay.
So that the majority doesn't dominate.
And is that something that should have been updated as time's gone on? Was there a need to update that and reform that in any way, shape, or form? Or has it been taken advantage of or corrupted? Like, does it get manipulated?
It comes up almost every election. Why do we have this, right? We're not. The United States is not a direct democracy, right? It's a representational democracy. So it's not a one-for-one vote that counts.
Nor is Canada.
Right, nor is Canada.
Yeah. And that's something that, in terms of creating more distrust, like, we all voted Trudeau in, who's like our version of Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And then, he's like, and he built this campaign about reforming the electoral system, and then now he's completely gone against that. And here we are, like, distrust out the yin yang, because it's like you're lying,
Distrust, man.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's huge.
People don't trust things anymore.
And so, what happens now?
I think that.
What are some different possibilities?
Well, I'll speak personally, man.
Yeah, this is what it's all about. We're just having a conversation. This is my
little flag, right? This is how I feel like I change the world, by helping people become better humans to one another. And we equip organizations with skills that are centered on their business, that ultimately makes their business a better functioning unit. But truth be told, my motivation isn't the organization. It's teaching the people the skills so that they have them when they go home, when they have a fight with their daughter or their wife or the man they want to flip off who cut them off in the car, whatever it is, man. I always say there's 2 things I wish I learned. I wished I learned financial management in school. Like, what's an RSP? One of these things, right? We need them. And then I wish I learned how to be a good, persuasive, influential, empathetic human. These are skills that can be taught, but we're never taught them. So what do? That's what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm trying to change the world one organization at a time, increasing their bottom line, improving what they do, but also imparting, I think, pretty imperative skills for life.
So how do you work with somebody then who maybe hasn't developed a high EQ for whatever reason? How do you get them from where they are to a better place?
First, it becomes aware of what they do and why they do it, right? Most people just assume that the way that they operate in the world, most everyone does too. And until you're either confronted with that or you think about it, right? That's a big shock for a lot of people. Oh, you don't process information the same way that I do, right? Yeah. So that very exercise of saying, this is your profile, but Sally's is this, and Mike's in accounting is that. That very process itself, for someone that actually wants to learn the information, is revolutionary. And then once you know the information, then there are tactics and skills that you can develop. That how do I approach that person then in whatever situation it may be, because his or her approaches could be different than mine.
So you're talking about people finding their why, which is very in line with finding your meaning, right? Of why they do what you do.
Well, it's the organization. It's at the organizational work, it's why do you build widgets? Right? If you're going to build widgets just to build widgets' sake and to make money, you're not going to keep people around that long. Right? But if you build widgets so that people can have easier access to information or a better commute to work or whatever the widget does, then people can buy into that. And they actually then feel like what they're doing is lending to a greater cause.
So is it now the organization becoming clear on their purpose.
That's the fundamental first step.
So it's getting really clear. And
I would challenge you guys. You guys have a sentence. Why do we exist? Why does Float House exist?
Well, we have that now.
Okay.
I mean, do you want to say it verbatim based on what we have defined?
In terms of the mission statement, or like the one crew has done?
Crew.
Verbatim? Jeez, now how are we looking? Isn't it?
We're here to enlighten humanity.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
And what does that mean? Kind of some of the same things that you're talking about. And I think your ultimate umbrella purpose is, to make people more conscious of themselves and their environment and the whole, and actually recognizing that it is all connected and influential upon each other. And you can look at that from many different levels,
term, like
spheres.
The I, what did you call that? Like the Trump phenomenon, Brexit, the taking care of myself first.
Populism?
Populism.
Yeah.
So getting away from that.
Yeah, well, awesome. I might challenge you guys a little bit because you said you guys had one, but the employees came up with one. What was that?
Did they come up with one?
Well, not really. I mean, we have basically when we do our meetings,
have our mission statement from when we first started,
right?
Which is not like it's like that's more like an operational mission statement in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
But like our bigger mission statement is why are we here? Why are we even doing this whole thing? Is what you said before, like to enlighten humanity, and that's a pretty big statement.
Do you think everyone in your organization could say that?
Probably, maybe not.
In one way, shape, or form.
Yes.
They can say that.
Yeah.
In one way, shape, or form. Like they'll say it their own way, but that's why.
And they might make it more specific, like to help people grow and evolve as a human being, or something like that.
So one recommendation is to just
make that really
make it clear,
permeable, and
make it really clear.
Cool.
And then communicate it.
Yeah.
The other then piece of that is then how is that done? And not just the tactical way through floating, but how do you what are the behaviors and the values that you guys support? And what are the ones that you won't tolerate? Right?
Yes. I really want to refer to that chart that we have
I know, the core values one.
Exactly, because we have a bunch of core values now.
Right, but it's one thing to just have them. It's the other thing, how do you live them?
Yeah.
And what does that actually look like?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's relatively new, so that's why I wish it. Well, this is awesome to be talking
and here's the thing, too. Like, these core values, like, from this process that we went through, like, we embody them. We live them and practice them all the time. So, we could go through and probably list off, 75% of them right now, close enough in terms of what we stand for, what we appreciate, what we won't tolerate, those sorts of things. So, things like open-mindedness, non-judgmentalism, respect, self-respect, self-care, trust, equality. Yeah. So
you should, another small recommendation, if you let me, you should probably have no more than 10.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. No more than 10. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes organizations, they produce this laundry list of things they believe, and then it becomes impossible to actually execute.
Just get really focused on those.
Get close on what you believe in, right? And then beyond that, how is that manifested in the way that you do business? Because otherwise they just become this lame exercise of some piece of paper that never gets implemented.
One thing that we do is we're not necessarily hard and fast with expiration dates. So somebody has purchased a float, we honor it, even if it was a year ago, and they could have 3 months expiration on it or something.
What core value does that reflect?
I'd just say
flexibility.
Honesty.
Okay, honesty.
Yeah, I mean, like, they paid for it, they should get it.
Okay. Here's another piece is how, this is a whole other topic, but I don't know what your reward structure looks like here. Again, money doesn't really motivate people. Mm-hmm. More and more literature saying is that the way that companies ought to reward their employees is based off of their behaviors reflecting their core values. Right? So, and whatever those the rewards, what they should look like, actually, you should sit down with each employee and figure out what's important to them. Whether it's a day off, or whether it's they can bring their dog to work, or whether it's whatever it is, right? Go figure out what's important to them, and then give that to them when they emulate and live your core values.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Because if you're following your core values, everything else is going to fall into place anyways, and the bottom line will take care of itself.
Right? Well, you have to have a good product, right?
Yeah.
Right?
In an ideal situation.
Yeah.
But yes.
But you'll have people that believe in your product and sell your product and believe it for themselves and work well together, and all that does affect your bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like the idea of motivating them or rewarding them for living those core values.
Yeah,
correct.
I feel
agreed.
like that is really powerful.
Yeah, figure out a way to kind of track that.
I believe that our team live those core values as well that we have as a business, and I feel like for them, if they're being acknowledged for being the person who they are at work, I think that'll just
100%.
crap out of them as opposed to trying to throw money at somebody.
And that's probably your biggest job as a business owner, right?
Yeah,
That's
people in your business is everything.
That's your biggest job. Yeah.
Cool.
So those are the things that I work on.
Very cool.
We do that either one-on-one with managers and business owners, or in group settings. We have modules that will go in for like half days or 3/4 day kind of thing.
So what's really important? Like, you can switch gears and go into anything you want right now. Like, what's something that you think is really important, like a really important discussion or conversation that should happen that's not happening in any realm you can think of right now?
I'm going to go back to what I do, man, because this is what I believe in so deeply. I don't think people value each other very well. I don't think that we do a very good job at valuing each other.
Right.
And I think if we did, 98% of our problems would go away.
Think like locally and globally?
Totally.
Like all levels?
Humanity is not we don't appreciate each other as humans. We don't value that. And that's my personal why. I did a lot of work on my own why. That's the conversation I want to be having.
What's one book that you could recommend for people to read? I think people should read.
There's a book by a collection of short stories by a woman by the name of Annie Dillard, who wrote a book called Teaching a Stone to Talk.
Cool.
And,
I like that title.
Yeah. And there's one particular story in there about how it's called Living with Weasels. And she actually became a weasel for a second as she happened upon this weasel on some unmarked path. And it's just a real amazing insight into what we were talking about before, being totally present and then being totally observant. That's a fun story to read.
What's something you're reading right now?
I just finished a book called How Not to Give a Fuck.
I've heard of this book.
It's rounds.
Yeah,
and
totally.
In these worlds, like I swear, these books kind of go viral among micro communities.
Do you know what though? It's
the subtle art of not giving a fuck. That
was what it is. You know what? I think it was insightful, but I probably wasn't revolutionary in what it was saying.
What's the core idea?
It was very Buddhist to me.
Okay.
Is don't become attached, right? Right. Care less about yourself. Invest in relationships, right? Some pretty.
So you could wrap it up in a paragraph, more or less.
It's like I think I just did. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, I'll go read that book.
Done. I like that.
What about you? What'd you just read?
I'm reading a book now called The Diffusion of Innovation.
Okay.
Basically talking about how new innovations get adopted or not by people, by organizations.
And what's the insight?
That people are not. I'm not finished yet, but basically people are not swayed and deterred or change their mind through facts and figures and statistics.
No.
But they are through storytelling.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of other interesting facts. Like basically, there's like 5 factors which determine how well a new innovation will be adopted or not, depending on various things. So lots of interesting stuff in that book. It's very dense, so I'm working my way through it.
What's that I cheat sometimes. Is it called Blink List? Is that what it is?
Blink, Malcolm Gladwell?
No. There's an app that gives you the summary.
Right. I should get that book or that app because you could probably sum up most books in like statements like that.
Right, and wouldn't that be great to just be able to? I can tell you it right now. What is it called? It's called Blinkist. Blinkist.
Yes, it basically gives you the main idea of each book.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which
I dig.
It gives you like the 10 takeaways, right?
Interesting.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good idea. Whoever did that app.
Yeah.
Okay, if you could go back in time and give Casey Miller, 20-year-old self, a phone call, what advice would you give that person?
It's not going to be all that insightful, man. You guys have a lot of smart people out there that say smarter stuff, but I think that we all have a lot to offer the world, and I think we should I should have told myself, just own who you are, right? Appreciate who you are. Be authentic to who you are and your story and your journey. And the more authentic you can be, I think more people respond to that.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
Keeps coming up over and over. That damn authenticity.
I'm not insightful on that sense, man.
No, but hey, maybe we're hitting on some truth there, right?
Exactly.
So, last question. So if you could change anything you want, you could wave a magic wand and change anything you want, anything, just once, and to whatever you want it to be. What would you change and why?
I would, hands down, I would give everyone the gift of empathy.
And why? Because
when we can fully feel and empathize really, with another person, it shows our own humanity. And that's what I think is lacking right now.
Yeah.
That connected piece. Everyone is almost always, we're very similar. We're very much the same. And we, for whatever reason, make so many divisions that we're not similar. Mm-hmm. And we're actually quite the same. And so I wish that we could be more empathetic. We end up seeing ourselves more, and we end up seeing the other person.
Beautiful. Awesome answer.
Yeah.
Great, man. Well, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask?
I was debating about going down one more road of, like the future as we're seeing. Let's say people become more empathetic, and institutions have to start owning their shit a little bit and regain that trust. Mm-hmm. I mean, what does that world kind of look like to you? Like, what things do you think would change? Do you see, I don't know. What is that? What kind of major shifts would you anticipate out of a world that is more empathetic? Would you see our relationship with the earth more harmonious? Would you see nations, be borderless more or less? Like resource management be different? I don't know. It's a very broad question.
Maybe
but I like these Harvard brains to just, I like throwing these big brains.
Again, I was at the bottom of the barrel.
Of Harvard.
I think, man, all those things that you said, I think we would just be all more conscientious about every choice that we made.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And on a personal level, I think that empathy is the key to happiness. Mm-hmm. I think we would all just feel a lot better. I know in my own personal life.
More secure,
Totally. Not afraid of Mexicans.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Our insecurities are huge, right? And I think a huge part of them is based off of what others think and all that kind of stuff. But if we can trust that, I can be who I am, bring that authenticity and not feel
here's the
judged for it.
Everyone has the same conversations. Either they're thinking bad about me, or I wonder if I'm standing out. We all are saying the same stuff.
We're so self-conscious.
What?
Yeah.
We're all having the exact same backstory.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're all insecurities and fears.
Yeah.
Why don't we just admit it? We all don't know what the hell we're doing.
It's true. It's true. And ultimately, why
are we okay with that?
Yeah. What's needed in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. People confuse, I think, oftentimes authority with leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's silly to think that, any other human being who's been alive has any more clear understanding of what this whole human experience is than any other human being that's ever been alive. You know what I mean? They might have their own experiences, but it's just fuck, it's what is this thing? What is this thing? Flesh bodies.
Yeah. What is it?
On that note, we will
flesh bodies.
We will let you folks ponder that.
For having me over.
Well, thank you very much, Casey. That's Casey Miller and 6.5consulting.com. Any social handles you want to throw out there?
Casey_6.5, right?
All right.
On Twitter.
Are you a big tweeter?
I'm not, but I have one.
I have one too. I have my Instagram linked to my Twitter, so all my photos just go over to Twitter.
Oh, you can do Instagram to Twitter now?
It's really good because it's just it looks like I'm doing Twitter, but I'm not. Really.
Yeah, and
Twitter is so tricky.
It is hard. I haven't figured.
It doesn't work for me. I don't want to get these text battles on Twitter land. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of work, a lot of headaches.
You guys are onto something good here, then.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Explore podcasts. Podcasts are amazing, man.
Yeah.
They are a very cool medium to connect and get your information out there and network and whatever it is, right?
How can I help you guys?
How can you help us?
Yeah.
I think just
You guys have helped me a lot, giving me an opportunity to share
support
something.
the podcast.
Okay.
You know, just like when we release it, just share it around.
Okay, we'll do that.
Tag some friends that might like to hear it.
Yeah.
And share it to your network.
Okay, all right.
That's it.
Cool.
And I'll tell people about Floathouse.
Yeah,
You guys
tell
are
people about
you guys are
Floathouse.
changing the world by making people be more introspective and self-aware,
That's the goal.
right? You got an
Yeah.
hour to just go be.
Yeah, and that's
Right.
it can be a bit challenging, right? Because it's like it's not necessarily a tangible result right away. Right away. Yes, but over time, for
Totally.
sure.
Plus, what I've been saying a lot lately too is that in the West, in our North American side, we don't really have any post-colonial traditions of going within. Really nothing, especially nothing outside of like religiosity. So it's very foreign for people, as a generalization, to kind of sit quietly and not be distracted with anything, and to feel their body and to be intimate with their mind and what that's all about. And it can be very intimidating for some people.
Well, there's no running. Like, where are you going to go? It's just like anything that's coming up for you in there is all self-generated, and sometimes people don't really want to face that.
I loved my experience. The only problem that didn't, and we can talk about this offline on the podcast,
Yeah.
but I got water lodged in there, and it's distracted from.
That's just a mechanical issue.
So I need to figure out how to do that, because I swim every day. But
Well, we use earplugs, but the other thing is.
But then that blocks the experience too, doesn't it?
No, you can use
I
earplugs.
find it's minimal, and you just kind of forget that they're there.
Yeah.
Like, your body attenuates pretty well to stuff like that. So, I find that.
But
you don't really.
So you had water in
Feel
your
it.
ears after the experiences you were getting at?
No, during, and I could feel the water because I have an ear problem.
Okay.
No, I wear the earplugs.
Yes.
right? And I find
We have
that
silicone
You won't
earplugs.
even know they're there. Like
Yeah.
10 minutes in.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then that's what I'll do next time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
try.
key is to be really still. Like, just when you're floating, like, don't be fidgeting around or scratching, and just try to be as still as possible. Because if you're moving the water, moving the air, you're gonna have that feeling, which is kind of what you're.
And plus,
Trying
you're
to
kind
not have it.
of
Right.
distracting yourself from just being there.
And bringing your awareness,
meditation.
like bringing it all inward.
Yeah.
And like getting out of your head a little bit too. I find by just getting out of my thinking mind so much and bringing my awareness into my physical body and feeling my physical body, like the aliveness that is in every cell that we have.
Yeah.
Moving your awareness into that really helps you get out of your head.
Mm-hmm.
And then now even looking at that at a bit of a distance and realizing that we're not necessarily our thoughts and we're not necessarily our bodies, and maybe there's potentially something else that's
Observing it all.
observing it all. So
I should
that's
go. I'm going to go sign up.
Cool.
Thank you guys again. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. And thanks for joining us, you at home. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, comment, review on iTunes and around Facebook. And I don't know. That's about it.
Come out to the meetups.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll see you there. It'd be
Bullseye
awesome.
comes out. You should come out sometime.
Yeah, I should.
We do all
Yeah.
this cool stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Man, I wonder
Okay.
what would happen if we had a Balthazar Casey Miller, epic podcast
Oh, I think that we should do that.
with beers.
And Roy.
Ooh, and Roy?
It'll get heated.
That would get heated. It'd
But
be
it'll
interesting.
be
It would be interesting.
We'll have to have beer.
Well, the
Yeah.
conflict
He always
part.
brings beer when he comes on, so that's
Oh, he's been on a couple times.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
He's a
if
he's
the
a
invitation's
regular.
there, I would love to come back, guys.
Cool.
Awesome.
That'd be awesome.
All
Cool.
right.
Cool.
Well, if you're with us, thanks for being here.
Mhm.
And please, again, thanks for supporting the podcast. We really appreciate everything. And until next time,
Do whatever is.
to whatever is.
It never is.
Yes.